A very good afternoon to all our viewers out there. Thank you very much for spending your Saturday afternoon with us today. On our webinar entitled Extensive Reading Adventure, Challenges and Opportunities for ESL Students. We are very lucky today. I am indeed very honored to have two distinguished guests with us today. We have Dr. Rob Waring. Hi, Dr. Rob, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Thank you, everybody, for attending.
Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. And we have Mr. Sean Sim Tat Chun. Hi, Sean.
Hi, good afternoon, all.
All right, it's great to see you again, Sean. All right, so we will be dealing with extensive reading this afternoon. So I will first introduce our first panelist, Dr. Rob Waring, a professor at the Notre Dame Seishin University in Okayama, Japan. Dr. Rob is an acknowledged expert in extensive reading and vocabulary acquisition. He has published over 80 articles and has given hundreds of lectures, plenaries, and also featured speaker presentations in 32 countries. He's also an executive board member of the Extensive Reading Foundation, responsible for the promotion of extensive reading globally, an author and series editor of a 6 series of graded readers by various publishers, and has recently published Teaching Extensive Reading in Another Language with Paul Nation. Right. As I mentioned to everyone when we were meeting briefly this morning, Dr. Rob, I am becoming more and more nervous the more I learn about you. You have so much to share, and definitely a huge an author, authority, a huge authority in terms of extensive reading. So we will proceed, Dr. Rob, and of course our viewers out there, and especially our viewers in Malaysia, in Johor specifically, would like to know about extensive reading. So okay. would you be kind enough to share with us this afternoon?
Okay. Yes, of course. So I'm going to share my screen now. I did start it before, but we've just lost that. So let me go to make sure I've got the right one. Okay. So I hope now that you can see this. I'm just checking the YouTube channel that's coming up, and it seems to be okay. We have a short delay. Yes, okay. So hello, everybody. I'm going to present today about a brief introduction to extensive reading. The software we're using today, SteamYard, is quite new to me. We've had a couple of technical issues about actually doing the presentation in presentation mode. So I'm going to be doing it in sort of like presenter mode. So I apologize for all of these things down the side here. Anyway, let me get started. I have about 20 minutes or so. So here is the QR code for these slides. If you wish to follow the slides, please download them. This will also be available for you at the end. So what is extensive reading? Let's get that out of the way first. Extensive reading involves reading a lot of easy books to build reading speed, fluency, and for building comprehension skills. So a lot here means the students need to be reading at minimum 1 book a week, at minimum. And I'm going to talk a little bit later about why that's essential. Anything less than that simply will not be beneficial for the student's development. The other type of reading we have is study reading, which we sometimes call intensive reading. So this focus is to intensively study the language to learn new words, grammar, language features, maybe close comprehension check, and so on and so on. So let's now look at the next slide. So what is extensive reading? And you can see this here is extensive reading. You can see the students here are reading a book. This also is extensive reading. They happen to be doing it in a bookstore. This is extensive reading in the classroom where students are reading together, or they're just reading casually in a library. Students are just reading. This here is taken in Indonesia. And this is also students just reading. And one of my favorite pictures of all time of somebody enjoying their reading. So there are two different aims, completely different aims with different reading needs for the study reading and the reading practice. The first one we're going to look at is the study reading. This is the intensive reading, and this has a focus to help students to learn to read. Learn to read. That is, learning the process of actually being able to read in a foreign language. And the type of materials that teachers use are textbooks or maybe worksheets, tests, that type of thing. The instruction is usually done as a class. Teachers tend to use the same material. We have the same textbook, the same reading material. It can involve, certainly at early levels, phonics, working on the alphabet, vocabulary building, sight word vocabulary, that type of thing, and focus on new words and grammar. And often we practice some of the reading skills. We'll be looking at text structure, for example. What's the difference between, say, an email or a story or information text, a web page, and so on. All of this here, all of this work is preparing students to actually read material for fun. All of this work is preparation material for actually reading. So the other type of reading is the reading practice. And this is where students read to learn rather than learn to read. The analogy could also be expressed by, for example, on the left side here, when you're learning to drive, you go to driving school. You learn the rules of the road from a book. You have an instructor next to you. You do the driving in a very closed environment and you have tests. That's the same kind of idea. The reading practice is like driving on the road. That is where you're learning to drive by navigating what's happening on the road, watching out for the dog on the right, being careful about which turn to make, and so on and so on. The actual practice, the fluency of learning to be a good driver. This is a learner driver. This is a good driver. So to do this, we use graded readers, where the students choose their own books at their own ability level. So in your class, if you have high-level students or low-level students, they choose something at their level. Everybody probably reads something different because they're choosing what they read, the material that they like at their level. So this is very tuned towards the learner. This is very learner-centered, whereas this tends to be much more classroom or teacher-centered. The focus is on fluency and speed, focus on comprehension. The idea is to understand the story and to promote natural reading practice. So if we look at these different pictures here, oops, I'm sorry about that in the background there. You can see on the left is extensive reading, and on the right here, there's a bit of a difference. You can see this type of reading here is much more like the study reading. And if you notice the crucial difference between the two, if you look at their hands, if you want to know whether a student is intensively reading or extensively reading, look at their hand. If they have a pencil in their hand, they're doing study reading. If they have a book in their hands, they're doing extensive reading. So how are students typically taught to read, certainly in Southeast Asia? Well, they're often given texts like this. It's not important for you to read this, but you can see the type of structure. Here we have, of course, the text itself. There's some comprehension questions and maybe some vocabulary. And this is a very, very typical reading text. If you look at a textbook, they look like this. So we would have a short text, maybe 200, possibly 300 different words on the page. There are some difficult words here which are highlighted in yellow. And the aim here of this material is to try to teach this material. We try to teach the words, teach the things. And often there may be some definitions. Notice here that there's not a lot of reading. If there's only 200 or 300 words in this unit, and there's 12 or 14 units, they're only covering between 3,000 to 5,000 words in total for the entire book. After they read, often what happens now is they would do some exercises, comprehension exercises, maybe vocab exercises, grammar exercises, and so on and so on. This follow-up reading. And all of this is about learning to read. That is to build up the language knowledge. This is language-focused learning. This is not fluency. This is not developing reading speed. This is not developing deep comprehension. This is not engaging with reading text. This is language study material. Now, of course, there's nothing wrong with doing language study reading. It's an important part of learning, but not having the fluency reading, the comprehension reading, the reading for natural reading practice. If that's not there, then something is very severely missing from the curriculum. So if we look at a text like this, you don't have to read this in detail, but maybe there's some words here that you would know, and maybe some words that you do not know. You may not know perambulations or bamboozled or tentatively, for example. But as you read here, if you listen to your brain, some of the time you're reading smoothly and easily, and sometimes you may slow down and go, what's that word? Oh, scouts. Yes, I know that word. Paper round. What's a paper round? Ah, yes, paper round. On the other day, that performed her perambulations. So notice there's two different modes in your brain there. Some of the time you're reading fast, you're focusing on the story, it's enjoyable, it's fluent and high comprehension. But within a half a second, your brain jumps back here to work out what this word would be. And what's this word? Where you have slow, careful reading, language focused reading. So your brain with this particular passage is jumping from reading fluently to reading intensively. So the problem here is that if there's too much time spent down here doing intensive reading, there's not going to be enough reading practice, and it becomes a language study activity, not a language fluency activity. You will not build the skill of reading from something like this. So if we look at typical courses, this is a typical course book here where we have various units, and you can see we would have, for example, maybe some vocabulary practice. We would have some various ideas and things we're looking at, the grammar and so on. This is a very typical syllabus. If we look at this and analyze what's actually happening here, what we have is various units. The structure here is we have new grammar, new vocabulary, new grammar, new vocabulary, new grammar, new vocabulary. All the way across the book, we have new grammar, new. The basic theory here, the language learning theory here, is we teach something new and we only need to teach it one time, because these simple adjectives, for example, she's hot, he's tired, are not going to come later in the language on, say, for example, IT. These sporting activities are not going to come later in the book in a unit on, say, history or travel. So this is what we call one-hit learning. The theory here is we only need to teach something one time, and therefore it has been learnt. Now, you know, and I know that's absolutely not true, but the textbook assumes this, because a lot of the grammar and a lot of the vocabulary is not being met again and again and again and again. And this is crucially important, because the most important thing in language education is to understand the forgetting curve. The forgetting curve says, if we teach something here on day one, we know that 50% of that knowledge will be lost within an hour. We know that 70% of that knowledge will be lost within a day or 2 days. We know that 90% of that knowledge will be forgotten within, say, a week or 30 days, something like that. This is the strongest finding in educational psychology. And as teachers, whether you're learning English or the piano or any other skill or any other types of knowledge, we need to bring this back again and again and again and again. If we do not do so, we will be causing a problem. So that's going to happen if we are only doing our textbook and the language is not getting repeated and recycled many, many times. We know from science that you need between 15 to 20 meetings of a word before it stays in your head. But if the book is only doing it 1 or 2 times, there is no way the students are going to remember the words by the end of the semester. So what happens is when the students get to the end of the semester, they can't remember what happened at the beginning of the book, and therefore they feel depressed and upset, and they feel stressed. So we need to find ways to fight the forgetting curve. The reason that's important is because if we teach something here with our textbook or maybe intensive word learning, we know it's going to be forgotten soon. So it must come back again soon, so it will be remembered. But it will start to be forgotten again, but we must bring it back again. And that's why we need the review. And this review is done with extensive reading and extensive listening. Any course or any curriculum that does not systematically bring this material back and only focuses on one-hit learning is severely, severely hampering the students from learning the language. So what needs to happen is we need to have our grammar and vocabulary, but we need to have reading materials which only practice this grammar and only practice this vocabulary. None of the other ones here, just trying to get this strong and very consolidated. When the students are comfortable reading at this level, they then move to the next level. Level 2 has this grammar and vocabulary plus this grammar and vocabulary. Level 3 has this grammar and vocabulary plus this plus that. It's systematically building on previous knowledge. If the students do not have this, there will be a problem with language loss and forgetting. The way we do this is with books called graded readers. So we have very easy books with very easy grammar, more difficult books, more difficult grammar. So the idea is students start with phonics. They read, say, 20 or 30 books at this level, consolidate and strengthen their knowledge. They then move up, consolidate and strengthen their knowledge, and so on. They move up until they can read native materials. And it has to be done in a system because the students typically don't have English outside the classroom. They have it only in the classroom. And we need to be very systematic about how we introduce language. If we only use the textbook, the input is often random and it is not being recycled and not being met again systematically and probably will be forgotten. So there are thousands of graded readers by many, many, many different publishers, by Oxford, Cambridge, Cengage, Pearson, all the big publishers have them. And the way they are at the very, very early levels, they have very few words on the page. Just like this. When students get comfortable at that level, they move up to the next level, beginner level. They then move up to the next level. The pictures get shorter, the text gets longer. Now we have paragraphs. Now we have more difficult words, more difficult grammar, fewer images. We're starting to get more academic type of text. And eventually students read material where they do not need a dictionary. And they can read and they do not need pictures. So it's crucially important that students read a lot. Each of these graded readers has between, for example, at the lowest level, maybe 300 or 400 words, at the highest level, 800 or 900 words. Beg your pardon, 8,000 words or so on. So if we look at this, if your students are reading 2 books a week in 1 month, it's the equivalent of an entire textbook for senior high. A senior high textbook is the equivalent of reading for 1 month. So if students are doing this type of reading, they're reading 20,000 words, but they're meeting only, say, 10,000 words in a senior high book or 3,000 words in a junior high book, which do you think they're going to learn more English from? Clearly, the more that they read, the more language they meet, the more times they meet the grammar, the more times they meet the vocabulary is going to significantly grow their vocabulary. And there's quite a lot of data to show this. At minimum, beginners need to read an hour a week at their ability. Why that? Because that's the level before forgetting curve kicks in too strongly. The intermediates need to read a minimum of an hour a week at their ability level before the forgetting curve kicks in. Advanced level learners need to read more because they're meeting it takes more to read. It takes more time to find words that they do not know. So the minimum requirement is an hour a week, which fights the forgetting curve. So which materials should we use for extensive reading? Storybooks or textbook with exercises? Storybooks is the one we use for extensive reading. Storybooks that are easy to read, no comprehension questions, no grammar work, just reading for fluency, reading a lot. Why do they have to read quickly? So they can meet a lot of words. If they read their textbook, they're reading on average between 10 to 17 words per minute. They're reading a storybook, they're reading 80 or 100, 120 words per minute. The reason it's slow here is because they need to stop, think, and use their dictionary. The material should be easy so they can read quickly. It should be read fast and enjoyably, not slowly and carefully. This is study reading. It should be, it's okay to use a dictionary sometimes, but probably no more than once per page. Otherwise, you're going back to study reading. The students should be reading for reading practice. It should not be reading for study. If you want to build fluency, we do reading for practice. So there's many different types of extensive reading. The minimum type is that it's easy, it's fast, it's high comprehension, and it's fun. Now, following the reading, some people have no assessment, and other people have a test or reports or exercises to check understanding. The reading could be self-selected by the students, or the teacher could select it. You choose. It's far better to do self-selected reading. I have about maybe 3 more minutes or so. I won't be long. There's a lot of reading is very important. The reading for extensive reading is done out of class. It's done for homework. It should take no class time. And some teachers have no follow-up, just read, that's it. But other ones do exercises like presentations or reading reports, or discuss your reading with people. So there's different types. So we have a kind of purist ER program, where there's lots of reading, reading at home with little or no assessment. Most people have an integrated program where the extensive reading is added to the existing program, okay? And we also have class reading where everybody reads the same material, everybody reads the same book, and we also have extensive reading, which is taught as literature. So extensive reading should be required, and the reason it should be required is because if it's optional, the students will opt out. It's very, very important, but unfortunately, many administrators do not see it as valuable. They see the textbook as valuable. They see language-focused learning as valuable. The problem is only language-focused learning will lead to a huge amount of forgetting and frustration on the parts of the students. And it's a major contributor why students feel they want to give up and they lack motivation after their 2nd or 3rd year of English. They try and they try and they try, but they don't seem to be learning, especially when the test comes, because the material they learned was weeks ago and it hasn't been recycled, and so therefore students get depressed. Requiring the learning means that this reading is valued. It should be part of the coursework and students should see it as natural. So some questions for you. You may say, how do I assess this reading? Well, the obvious answer is to go digital. I'm going to show you 2 websites in a short while that have a learner management system. The students log in, they do the reading, the website records what they read, they have tests that they can get, and you can download all the data. If you don't have a digital option, my advice is don't try to test them on each book, but assess them on the number of words they've read, the pages they've read, maybe ask them to do a report on their reading, make a presentation, and so on. So you may say to me, nice idea, we have to do the extensive reading, but I'm sorry, I have no time in my course. However, if you don't have this extensive reading, where will your students get the massive exposure they need? To become an intermediate level learner, they need about 800,000 words. To become advanced, they need around 4 million words. And that's hundreds of textbooks. The next one, we say, oh, I'm sorry, we can't do extensive reading. We have a fixed curriculum. The government has told us, or the school has told us. My advice is speak with your course designers. Build in this reading and reallocate resources, because if this reading is not done, there'll be too much forgetting. The last one, many teachers say, I'm sorry, I can't do this because we have to get students to prepare for tests. but research shows that students do better if they can read faster, if they're reading on tests. This is the Extensive Reading Foundation, where you can find lots and lots of information and help. We have guidebooks, there's a bibliography for research, ER toolkit, articles on extensive reading, there's Facebook pages. We have grants for money for people who need to start a program, and we have affiliate organizations, and hopefully we can add Penang and Malaysia soon. This here is, if you want to learn more about extensive reading, this is a video that I created. It's on YouTube that talks about the absolute basics for people new to ER. It's about 45 minutes. I'll have a bit more time than today. If you want to find out how to do extensive reading, but you have no money and you have no resources, again, there's a YouTube video here for you to have a look at. The two websites I'd like to mention, which is ErCentral.com. This is completely free. Thousands of reading, there's tests, there's levels. You can log in your students, you can download their data. The other website I want to show you is called XReading. This is not free, but it has the publishers graded readers by Oxford, Cambridge, Macmillan, and is a very, very high quality site. Yeah. If you want to do extensive listening, then please look at this website. So this is my last slide. If you want to download these slides, please have a look. Here is the QR code. I'm sorry that was rather quick, but please go back, look at the YouTube video and go through it more slowly. Thank you for your time. Sorry, I'm about 2 minutes late.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rob. I think those precious 26 minutes that you have spent with us, we have learned so much. And basically, the next question that I was about to ask you has been dealt with, which are the challenges. And I think the issue that you have shared with us regarding pressure due to conforming to the syllabus is what many of our teachers in Malaysia is facing right now.
Correct.
But whatever it is, I do believe that extensive reading do actually speed up language learning.
Very much so.
Very much so. The small mini projects that I carried out when I was a teacher, I find that my students are becoming richer in the language, in their writing, and also in their speaking as well. So thank you so much.
Right.
Definitely.
To go on to that, if you don't mind. The function of extensive reading is not only to build reading speed and fluency, it's really about language consolidation. The language textbook is about teaching pieces of language. Piece of language, a piece of grammar, piece of vocabulary, piece of grammar, piece of vocabulary, pieces of knowledge. But that's not connected. It's not a whole in any way. So the students need to meet the grammar, meet the vocabulary, see how they work together to build up this sense of language. Now, this sense of language, what feels right and what feels wrong, is something that you cannot teach students. They have to build it themselves. And if we're only using textbooks, fixed courses, it makes it very, very difficult for students to build this knowledge, this network, this sense of language. So extensive reading is about consolidation of language, and also about learning about the world and other places as well. So it's much more than just, much more than just reading. It's about language consolidation, systematic language consolidation.
Right. In a way, I think we have seen a little bit of progress in the textbook that we use in Malaysia right now, when we have the curriculum aligned to CEFR. The textbook that we are using right now in Malaysia for secondary school, which is Full Blast and the download, it has the skills being repeated at least 8 times in the textbooks, and
the skills or the language? The skills or the language? The
skills.
Okay, so we need the language to be met again.
As
I said, words need to be met at least 15 to 20 times. We have absolutely no knowledge about how long it takes to learn a grammatical form. We do know from research that to learn the past simple tense and to be able to use it correctly, you need to have met it between 5 to 10,000 times. 5 to 10,000 times before they're comfortable with it. And there's no textbook on earth can teach that.
Yeah, and that is the grammar part. And it's a lot easier when we talk about words. Like you mentioned just now, 15 meetings for the words to be embedded in the student's thought.
The vast, about 40% of words in textbooks are only met one time. There's only about 10% of the words are met more than 20 times. Only 10% more than 20 times. And you can guess those words. The, get, have, some, be. All the rest are not met enough times to be learnt in the textbook.
Yeah.
That doesn't say textbooks are bad, but they're only introducing the language. They're not deepening the language. That's the problem. We need to have both, yeah?
Right. As you mentioned, language study. The textbook is about language study.
Correct.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Rob. I think
My pleasure.
Johor State Education Department is very much interested with your extensive reading foundation. We would learn more.
Let's communicate. I'll be in Malaysia and Singapore next year, and hopefully we can.
Yeah. Dr. Navinda introduced Extensive Reading Foundation to me, and that's when I had the idea of to invite you to have a talk with our viewers first, and probably we can get more teachers in Johor to go on board and become a member of your foundation. Well, and hopefully we could
give some talks in person. I'd have to
and where would you be organizing your
got tours planned for Indonesia and for Thailand, for Vietnam, but nothing in Malaysia just yet. So, but I do hope to do something. Maybe I'll be in Penang, but I'm going to be free with my time next year. So I'd love to come and talk to you people. I have a very good friend of mine lives in Johor Bahru. I'd like to go visit him. So, hello. We seem to have frozen. Hello. Okay, it seems only me here at the moment. I think we need Sean is going to be our next presenter. The YouTube is working, but we've seemed to have lost our host. Sean, please take over.
Hi. Excuse me. All right, thank you. Oh, there we are. Panrokia's back. YouTube seems to be working. Not too sure.
On the transformation project, specifically the Trust School project. He has also supported B40 schools in Johor in another private-public partnership project where he was involved in coaching English teachers. And I know Sean personally through our Finco project together between Johor State Education Department and having you as part of our in-service teacher training programs. Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Sean, for being with us today.
No problem. Pleasure to be here.
All right. I believe that you have plenty to share based on your experience conducting reading, specifically conducting reading with our in-service teachers in Malaysia and also in Johor. Okay, so without further delay, I will hand over the stage to you to share your experience.
No problem. Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me to give you all share some of my insights with all of you. I hope my session today will be beneficial as of Dr. Rob's session just now. So just let me see if I could share my screen now. Okay. Just let me check if it's on YouTube. Okay, there we are. Right. So today I'm going to share really, or rather, different perspective than what Dr. Rob has mentioned just now. I'll be sharing a look at professional development. All right, so extensive reading at schools, a look at professional development. And I guess it's an opportunity for all of us to reflect on this issue. I think a lot of us here are teachers. I think at this point in time, I'd like all of you to put in your reflection cap to think about the kind of professional development that you've received throughout the years that you've been in service as a teacher. Right. Dr. Rob just now mentioned something really interesting about being an administrator. And obviously, being an administrator, a school principal of international school in Indonesia, there's a lot of for me to really think about, especially in developing language. So I guess a question that I always ask myself is, as a school leader, how do I lead extensive reading in schools? So this thought comes to me, right? Because obviously I first need to know the context of my learners, right? So if my learners or the learner coming to my school at that time is from what we call in Indonesia Sekolah Negeri, or in Malaysia Sekolah Kebangsaan or SMK, right? So that would mean that English is probably their third, fourth, or even fifth language for that matter. However, if a child has been in our system, all right, throughout the years in an international school, going through the Singapore curriculum. So our school uses a Singapore curriculum, and they would take the Cambridge examination, right, in a form of checkpoint, and then they go on to IGCSE and then A levels, right, in the secondary level, right. So if they've gone through our system, with the Singapore curriculum, typically you would say that English would be near native for them, or even first language, right. So how do I juggle, these things? How do I juggle? All right, there are different kind of competency levels in this school, and I hope that throughout the session today, I'm able to unlock that question for all of you. So these are things that really is important as we look at the school context and how we are able to infuse extensive reading in schools. So just to share a context, a couple of things that I do to make sure that for me, because I'm also a language graduate, so I look at language. I ask myself, is teaching language in my school fun? Okay, do they get something out of it, right? Do they enjoy being in the lessons? And also in this current school, I also teach literature. So I want to make sure that literature comes alive in the classroom as well. Okay, so a couple of things that I do in this school, I lead this school is, number one, would be what we call the silent reading program. So every morning for a couple of sessions before they start school, they would go through silent reading, just like what Dr. Rob mentioned just now, just reading for pleasure. They could pick up any books. Now, before COVID, obviously, we just renovated the library. So I personally believe a library is a sacred place, is a place as a safe place, right, where everybody should come in and feel welcome in the library. So we've just recently renovated the library. I would say it's a really, really nice library. That's something that I really want to make sure that, children in my school can come in. Obviously, we are now only restarting the schools, all right? They are just coming in, but there are already students coming into the school system and also making use of the library, okay? All right, so I guess the question that I would like to ask all of you at this point is, teachers, do you feel that you've been given the right training or professional development throughout your career to teach literacy or reading? Now, this is a rhetorical question, but I think for a large majority of you thinking about this question, you go like, yeah, maybe I've gone through a few, right? But does it have any impact? Does it really help you being a teacher? Right, so I would say you are not alone. So in 2010, not too long ago, research with the Institute of Educational Sciences, IES, surveyed more than 2,200 pre-service teachers about how much their lesson plans focus on essential components of the reading instructions. Guess what? Only 25% reported that their lesson plans included a strong overall focus on reading instructions, right? So as I said, it's not to point fingers at anyone. It's not to say that, okay, right, only Malaysia teachers are having troubles. This survey was done for teachers in the United States, all right? So I guess teachers around the world are struggling with this whole concept of how do I improve literacy? How do I improve reading? Okay, so I guess the question now I'd like to ask, moving on to my next session, is what is professional development then? We've talked about it. So what is professional development? So no matter how good pre-service training for teachers is, it cannot be expected to prepare teachers for all the challenges that will face throughout their careers, because every single year is something new. Every single group is different, so every single cohort that you graduate is different. And as senior teachers, and teachers teaching for a few years, that, all right? So no matter how good, you've got your degree, you've got a master's, some even PhD in education, that doesn't immediately qualify that you'll be able to develop literacy in schools, right? So this is where education systems would need to provide teachers with a variety of opportunities for in-service professional development to make sure that teachers of high quality, of high standard. And this is where the ministry in recent times has I guess invested a lot, aligning with Cambridge and the CFR and also master trainers and all of these things to make sure that all teachers are well supported. Okay, so professional development simply means that activities that develop individual skills, knowledge, expertise, and other characteristics as a teacher. So the moment you've gone through something, whether it's something that your Ketua Panitia or HOD has organized, or something that's done externally, okay, PPD or JPN has invited you to join the professional development, whatever the activity is, the moment it develops your skills, knowledge, and expertise as a teacher, that would constitute as professional development. Now, I would like to share, as what Puan Rokia has mentioned just now, I was very blessed to be part of two really, really interesting transformation projects in Malaysia. The first one being with the Trust School project, called Project Sekolah Amanah, being the education advisor. And the second transformation project is with Finco, where we look specifically at developing English teachers. This was before I was appointed as principal here in Semarang, Indonesia. All right, so I guess lessons from Leappad. So Leappad is an interesting project. It's a whole school transformation where we as consultants go in to support the schools in four big categories, right? Four big standards, if you like, or four big strategic goals. Now, I want to zoom in specifically on standard 2, as you can see there, right, where we coach and develop teachers predominantly in developing quality education or quality teaching and teaching and learning, rather, right, in their classrooms. So the question is, how did Leappad tackle extensive reading training for teachers? Now, one of the big things that I personally did as a consultant for teachers and also for the school leaders is I'll go in and literally ask the teachers teaching, especially primary 1 or year 1, or we say tahun 1 in Malaysia, right? How many of your students could actually read in English, like actually read? Okay, so as you know, reading, there's two components, decoding and deciphering. We're not talking about decoding, like reading, like I like to play football. Like they could read, but do they actually understand? So that's the next level, right? Do they actually decipher what they've read? Okay, so often what I notice in schools is nobody actually has an answer for this. Even when I ask the PK1, which is the vice principal of academics, do you actually know how many of your students could actually read in English? I was actually taken aback. I'm not painting a negative light for these teachers, right? These teachers are really, really excellent teachers, and the leaders that I've met, they're all excellent leaders. However, this pertinent question could not be answered, right? So I think as I help Sekolah Amanah, okay, or the trust schools, especially pertaining with regards to English language development, that's one of the first few questions I will ask them. So a case study is one of the schools in Johor Bahru called SK Medini. We were able to do this thing called shared reading or circle time. Okay, this was adapted from the UK, where we literally had big books. We got the students to sit around. All right, this is away from the lesson, right? This is away from the rigors of the textbook, right? Let's just sit down with a big book. No, we kind of forced, okay, all Sekolah Amanah to have a reading corner at the back of each classrooms, okay, for the sole reason to sit down, okay, and to kind of just literally sit down and let's read, Okay, let's read. Okay, another one the school that I really helped quite extensively is SK Kampung Layau. This is in Kota Tinggi, Johor, under this project. And this was exactly, we had a couple of teachers there who were really big proponents for this whole shared reading concept, where, you're just sitting down together and just reading, right? Isn't that like so much more exciting, so much more fun? And if I remember one of the schools that I helped, right? If that topic or theme is, for example, say that a child is lost in a forest, for example. I remember this teacher from SK Layao. She actually, have this classroom, okay, in a forest theme, all right, so that they actually look around. Oh, I'm coming into the forest, and it's kind of similar to that whole shared reading, okay, and all of these things, So that's a couple of lessons. So moving on to secondary schools as well, I was very surprised as well. And from secondary teachers um, teaching that the same question could be asked: how many of your students could actually read? How many of your students could actually read in English? Okay, so same response. A lot of the secondary one teachers, form one teachers, were not too sure, because they just wanted to get the students in. Right, okay, let's open a textbook and let's just start, kind of going through the textbook, right? However, this question, I guess, it's essential, because what's the point of going through the textbook if they do not have basic mastery? And sorry to say, secondary teachers, I think we common or often point the fingers, right, at the primary school, like, oh, it's because the primary school did not set a good foundation, so I'm inheriting, okay, all of these secondary one students or form one students who can't read, right? Okay, fine. Let's not point fingers here, right? Let's just try to look for the best way forward. So I truly believe that extensive reading could have a place in the classroom. So one of the schools that I worked with, SMK Gelang Patah, they would have a weekly kind of session just to read, just for the students to read. Okay, so that's a couple of examples. I hope that I have shared, so that for you, maybe you can get some ideas from there. Now, the next item, or the next project that I was on not too long ago, is Finco. Okay, so Finco is Financial Industry Collective Outreach, right? And this is in conjunction with Bank Negara. So my main role is to coach English teachers, and for us, we were very clear. We wanted to support B40 schools, right? Because those are the schools which has the most need. So I was given 20 schools to develop and help out, predominantly primary schools, because at that time the curriculum was really, really new, aligning to CFR and also what you call that, the Cambridge textbooks, right? So the question is, how did Finco tackle extensive reading training for teachers? Right, so this is a bit different, right? So what we did was to provide workshops for teachers, as you can see in the picture there, and also one-on-one coaching, and as well for me traveling to schools. This was, of course, pre-pandemic. I was able to freely go to schools, okay, and develop all of these teachers that we have given, or at least given to us. So the question is, how do we tackle, right? So I guess for me, working with teachers of the 20 schools given to me, our approach is a bit different, in a sense that they try to develop pedagogy, right? Okay, how do you use pedagogy in making English alive in the classroom? Okay, how do you use these new resources that you've gotten from the ministry to make it alive in the classroom, right? So I think that's the challenge here, right? Because if we are constricted by the scheme of work, all right, week one, lesson one, this is the lesson. You do not give, I guess, room to breathe for yourself and even to students, right? So I had this tremendous opportunity to share with teachers a few pedagogical approaches that can be linked to extensively reading. What I mean by that is there were two that we were focusing on. One of it is assessment for learning. So how do you kind of use assessment for learning practices in any kind of reading topics? And also the other one being differentiation. We all know that if your school is in the village, okay, so obviously students do not have that mastery. So then how do we make sure that you can make this English lesson come alive. Right. So there are a few, I guess, challenges that I'm going to address later on, where some of the common challenges that I hear teachers throughout my two big consulting project I've had, in the state of Johor. And I hope that by sharing those ideas, I'm able to help you answer some of those questions. Right. So I guess my kind of thing here is I hope when presented with any CPD or coaching, it's imperative that teachers seize that opportunity. So I hope that, just hop onto it. You wouldn't know, okay, that it might work for you, it might not work for you. And not only joining CPDs, actually trying it out in your classrooms. I think that's important. Right, so these are some of the challenges faced by Malaysian teachers, especially when we try to introduce stuff like big books, shared reading, silent reading, drop everything and read. These are all like additional extensive reading, I guess, methodology and approaches that we've tried, or I personally have tried with teachers throughout my consulting project, right? So these feedback, okay, I often come across. I have no time to complete all the items in the scheme of work. All right, so I think this is a bit of um, yes and no to this. Like for me personally, right? Yes, in a sense that scheme of work is there, it's important. However, where teachers often misunderstand is that they've got to complete every single thing in the scheme of work. For me personally, as a teacher and a school administrator, I would tell my teachers, focus on the objectives. So what are the objectives that is meant to develop for that year group? Okay, so what are the objectives? So those items in the scheme of work should always be a guide, because every school context is different, right? So if you're teaching in a, say, remote type 2 village, if it's a generator, are you trying to tell me that those activities might work for that kind of schools, right? So these are some of the questions. However, not to mention, the objectives would still remain, right? So how do we then use kind of all the literacy techniques that we have, all the reading techniques to kind of make sure that the objectives are met? So you can even infuse that in your classroom. So what Dr. Rob said, you can't just like focus on skills. Yeah, that's important. But if the word repetition is not enough, you wouldn't be able, and the students don't appreciate and do not actually like to read. Okay, so you have a difficult time in completing the scheme of work, right? Now, the next one I often hear as well. Okay, this is no knock to any SISC or Inspectorate or JPN, PPD. I've met really lovely SISC officers and NAZE and PPD, JPN officers. Obviously, I've worked extensively with Puan Rokia here today and Mr. Ermi. They're all fantastic officers. All right, for me, to be honest, as teachers, you shouldn't be scared, because if you're doing something that's right and you can justify, right, that shouldn't be the case, right? And you can say very clearly, yes, I'm doing this because so and so forth. Oftentimes where I notice teachers are scared because they do not know how to justify their projects and programs that they want to do. You can't tell me, okay, that if you're having this really, really cool, like, I don't know, like circle time example, right, infused within your classroom, the SIC officer is going to be angry at you. I don't know, if anything, they would probably applaud you, right? So the thing here is to be able to justify how you could infuse that within your scheme of work. I think that's key. All right, you can say, yep, I'm achieving these objectives, right? So the next one I always say is, if I make reading lessons fun, they are not learning anything. Okay, so I mean, isn't that like contrary to popular belief? Like if students find it fun, wouldn't they learn something? So I don't know. I mean, that's something that I struggle to grapple with, especially with coaching of teachers, right? So obviously you need to make your lessons fun. I mean, but where teachers get off tangent is fun but no substance. I think that's something that we do not want. Fun, but it's anchored on the objective. So even like kind of when you want to make sure that you have literacy, right? Okay, yep, fun. What's the outcome, right? So what you expect them to do at the end of the lessons, right? Right. So next, the other one. How can I cater for 2 to 3 children in my class who can't read when there are so many other students in my classroom? right? So this is where I would say when I helped out, especially with the Finco project, when we talk about differentiation. So this is really, really key. And Dr. Rob also mentioned just now about graded readers, right? So where you're able to have the right kind of reading text at the right level, right? Doesn't mean that your child is at 8 years old supposed to be year two. Doesn't mean that your child can read at a reading age of, say, an 8 year old. His or her reading level might be of 5 to 6 year old. So are we actually supporting your child? Are we actually helping our child to get into the right kind of reading level? Okay, so that's something to think about as well, right? Now, my students are village students. I don't expect them to be able to read in English. Um, I want to take a case study very quickly. I know my time is almost up. Just give me a couple of minutes. I'm almost ending. Of SK Kampung Layo. Not Kampung Layo. What's that? Ledang Pendas. All right. So this is one of our really, I guess, interesting case studies that we had. This is an Orang Asli school in Galang Patah, all right, area. And you'd be very surprised that the English teachers take great pride in developing that whole extensive reading. The teacher would take them out to that like open space to read, just like to enjoy reading. And you'll be very surprised that even though they are labeled village students, they are able to read. Okay, so often, the battle's really lost even before we start. Okay, all right, even before we start, kind of um, the mindset that is right. So we've lost the mindset. Like, okay, these are village kids, right? They are going to struggle, but given the right push and opportunity, I'm sure they'll be able to do well. All right, next one. We do not have enough interesting reading resources in school. This is another interesting one. Yes, reading resources are really expensive, especially when it's imported books from Cambridge or Oxford University Press, Hodder, Pearson. These are the big ones. We have a lot of great graded readers. However, it is very expensive, and for village school, we probably could not afford that. But to be honest, with the advent of internet, I think there are a lot of legal free ebooks, not the illegal pirated copy, but the legal ones, right? So I think as English teachers, if you really want to care about our students, especially developing them from standard 1 all the way up to standard 6 or year 6, right? I think you should do a bit of support for your child, especially if your child is, village students and they don't have any access to good quality resources out there, right? So next one, I've not been adequately trained to handle literacy development, which is true, right? That's what I've mentioned just now. As I said, you're not alone. So learning never stops. Okay, my advice is try something different. You wouldn't know if you've not tried, the kind of um, techniques, right? And review. Did it work? Did it not work? All right. And lastly, okay, I'm not an English optionist, right? This could not be avoided. You're not actually an English or linguistics graduate and you're asked to teach English, I guess. Okay. Now I've seen many of the non-English optionists actually do really, really well. Okay. So I hope that all of you do not lose hope. All right. Don't be discouraged. You yourself, as a non-English optionist, I think you should also practice extensive reading, right? Because you would then also improve your vocabulary. And you know what? Some of the greatest teachers that I've seen, even non-optionists, they are willing to tell the students, I'm learning with you. All right. I'm learning with you. So let's read together, right? And they develop together, right? Just sitting down and reading together. I think that's really, really interesting, right? An interesting concept, right? So I've seen a lot of those in some village schools that I've helped as well. Right. So, advice to schools. I know some of you are disillusioned sometimes with administrators who could not understand your plight. So, the agent of change in any school, to be honest, is the middle management, all right, which is the head of department. So, if there are any heads of departments here, ketua panitia in this school, I would say that you would be the agents of change in your school, all right? Look at some of the programs that what Dr. Rob have mentioned and what I've shared today, and think how can you infuse this kind of just reading, right? Okay, reading for fun kind of aspect into the classroom, and how can you structure that into the professional development of your classroom, or of your, I mean, supporting English teachers in your school rather. All right. So as teachers, all right, if you are teachers in this forum today, in this webinar, now let's reflect on all of the above challenges, feedback I've mentioned, and let's see if we can make a positive change. All right. So last component. All right, and I don't want to get into this. I'm sure you are already very familiar. All right. So what or how can I start? Right. So if you are head of department and you want to lead some sort of training, okay. So these are the 5 major components of developing literacy. Okay, reading. Now it doesn't have to be this technical, to be honest. All right. Because extensive reading is, like as I said, as what Dr. Rob has said, just reading, right? Reading for fun. However, there's always a theoretical backing towards improving one's literacy. And through research, we all know that these are the 5 main components: phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension, right? So these are the 5 kind of components. If you are English HOD, or if you are an English teacher, you like to lead these kind of discussions in your PLC, this is probably something you could start, right? So are your students, let's just bring to the table, right? Are students good at phonics? Could they actually decipher something, or are they fluent in their reading? Okay, all right. So just to wrap up, and just to end my session, have fun, I guess, is my message. Now let's not get muddled up with all of these techniques and theories, which I guess we've shared for this almost 1 hour. Reading is supposed to be fun, and I'm always a firm believer in this. And the more we can kind of get that component in, I think the better it is, for everybody, because then teaching for you becomes fun, because students are now having fun. With that, thank you very much, and I'll pass the time back to.
Thank you very much, Sean. I think we have we might have a little bit of time for question and answer. I will take one from Selina Oi to Dr. Rob. What about secondary students who are extremely weak in vocabulary? It's extremely hard to get them to read extensively, especially on their own, as teachers are tied to finishing the syllabus. Okay, Dr. Rob, your advice? Izul, could you help us? I think Dr. Rob is muted.
I'm fine now. Thank you. Sorry. Yes. My first advice is to stop the teachers sticking only to the fixed curriculum, because that's clearly damaging them. The student has identified themselves here in this sentence. The person here has identified that the being tied to the curriculum is causing reading problems and vocabulary problems. So there's the first problem. We need to expand the curriculum to include systematic vocabulary learning, and then deepen that knowledge. The important thing to learn here is there's 2 levels of word knowledge. The first level is the first stage, which is learning the form, the meaning, and the spelling. So apple means da-da-da-da, okay? That's the first stage. Unfortunately, 99% of vocabulary teaching stops there. The second stage that students need to learn is how the words fit together, the collocations, the colligations. Is it a polite word? Is it rude word? Which topic area is it in? How quickly can I access the word? All of that extra word knowledge you can get from massive exposure. And if students don't know how words go together, they cannot say something. So therefore, in order to speak well, extensive reading is very, very important, because it consolidates and strengthens that knowledge. So the students who are weak in vocabulary, the first thing is structured, intensive, clearly focused first stage vocabulary learning through, say, like an app. And we know that students learning intensively through a good app or a good program system of vocabulary. Unfortunately, most teachers don't know how to teach vocabulary well. But if it's good and systematic, students can learn 10, 20, 30 words an hour. That's not a problem if it's systematic. So you need to then build on top of that with the reading as soon as you can. So lots of intensive vocabulary. So there's apps out there like Word Learner, for example, or Quizlet or something, but you have to be teaching the right words. And you need to have a look. If you look at the new Dolch list, which I'll put into the YouTube thing in a moment, new Dolch list, has a list of vocabulary for children, and I'm putting that up now into the YouTube channel.
And just to add to Dr. Rob, one of the initiatives as a school leader, international school leader, is a really comprehensive look at vocabulary, as what Dr. Rob was mentioning just now. So one of the things that we do in school is a weekly vocabulary list where students are, I'm not say forced to memorize, but kind of looking through, okay, right, these are the vocabulary lists, which is linked to the topic that should be taught for that day. So we built that very strong foundation from primary. So by the time they get to secondary, to be honest, a lot of our students are already, if they've gone through my system, they would already be quite, I would say, near native or first language proficient in terms of the language.
Yeah. Memorization is probably the strongest form of learning that we know. Period. And so it's not something we should discount as sort of saying, oh, that was what we did in behaviorism in 1960s. It is the strongest form of learning that we know. And we need to take advantage of it. So conscious word learning is very useful. Let's make it interesting. Let's make it fun. But conscious effort on things like that is extremely important. Unfortunately, I think our industry has forgotten that now. We think it's old, but it's not old. We know that intensive studying from vocabulary is between 20 to 50 times faster than from reading. Between 20 to 50 times faster than learning from reading. There's a lot of research out there for that. Intensive study is nothing wrong with memorization, but it has to be systematic and it has to build on previous knowledge. It has to come back again. Don't just teach a word list and drop it. Make sure those words come back again and again and again and again and again. Otherwise, you're wasting your time.
Thank you very much. I think memorization, as you mentioned, has been forgotten and has been looked at in a different light. So having it coming again and again and again as a structured way of memorizing the words is something that probably is worth for our teachers to look into in order
and
to
not only just learn the word, but also meet them together with other words to know how they fit together. For example, we say blonde hair, we don't say yellow hair. Students need to know why we say that. Why do we say beautiful girl, not beautiful man? Now, no dictionary is going to tell you that. They need to pick that up from sense, right? You can't say I had a date with my handsome girlfriend. It just sounds strange, right? So they need to know how the words go together. It's an incredibly important part of vocabulary learning. It's often missed.
Right. And probably one for you, Sean, here from Ms. Pun Kuzali. How to engage and monitor the young learners with extensive reading program during online sessions.
Because we are in the pandemic situation,
Yeah.
right? I think
And also in Malaysia currently, only the Form 5 students are coming every day. The rest are taking turns according to their groups. So 1 week they are learning online. The following week they become face to face.
Yeah. To be honest, there's no right answer to this. Obviously, it all depends on the context of your school, context of how many periods that you have. Are there any extra sessions that you could facilitate outside the classroom? Are you able to facilitate small learners coming into the school? So I guess the answer is depends. So let me kind of structure what I'm trying to say here. Right. So if you have, say, 10 periods given to you and you want to make a conscious effort to say that, right, okay, I want to use 2 periods out of the week to kind of have this extra reading program. That's one way of doing it. So you've infused that within your curriculum. Another way is you could talk to your ketua panitia, right? Or if you are one, you could structure it, all right, on top of, say, from 7 o'clock to 2 o'clock p.m. Lessons daily, can we have extra, like, I don't know, from 2:15 up to, or is it early morning from 7 or something like that, right? So an extra program that's not within the timetable. So I guess that is how we can kind of structure online. And because it's online, I think a lot of students in Malaysia, they're like WhatsApp and Telegram. That could easily be, you could create a group from there, right? This is our fun kind of English program now from 2 o'clock. Let's join. You can call it whatever. Miss Poon's fun vocab. I don't know. I'm not good with names, right? So
it could be part of their HIP program. HIP, Dr. Rob, is a highly immersive program.
I see.
that we are carrying out in all the schools, all government schools in Malaysia currently.
Yeah. And also, I'm not sure if this is currently allowed yet, but at least in Indonesia, as we are introducing students, we are doing what we call hybrid learning. So some students come online, some are actually at home, and we beam the teacher with Zoom, right? So there are, as I said, there is no right answer to this, but obviously there are many ways how we, in fact, some of my teachers are still overseas, so we beam that teachers from overseas into the classroom, right? Yeah, so I guess there's no one right answer to this, but as I said, I think most important is Poon, if I get your name right, Poon, right? You really need to know your learners, right, where they are at, and I guess trying to see what kind of facilities that you have available with you, and if you are teaching from school, what are some of the facilities that can be made available to you by the administrator? Yeah. Okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I think we have spent over an hour on this very, very engaging and highly informative session with Dr. Rob and Mr. Sean. We would love to hear from you again, probably as an officer at the Johor State Education Department. We will look into and read more about your extensive reading foundation and see how we could get more teachers in Johor to know about it, and most importantly to be part of the foundation for the sake of education for our young learners.
Right. The
Okay.
Extensive Reading Foundation is really looking to have an affiliate organization within Malaysia to promote extensive reading there. And so I'll be looking for contacts in the next few years or so to work with schools or individuals, governments.
Oh,
yeah.
that's great. That's great.
I'm currently working with 2 or 3 governments in Southeast Asia. So let's stay in touch, okay?
Yes, yes, definitely, definitely.
Thank you.
I will seize the opportunity.
Good.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. It
Thank
has
everybody
been, yeah, so it's been amazing. So thank you very much. And also thank to all our audience for joining us on this Saturday afternoon. Okay, thank you. We would like to see you
Nice day,
again
everybody.
in our next webinar. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Take care.